The history of Holy Week. Discover the mysteries and wonders of Holy Week, a tradition that has fascinated humanity for millennia. From its humble beginnings to its place in the modern world, we invite you to explore the curious facts and hidden stories behind this sacred celebration. Chapter 1: Origins and Meaning. Holy Week, with its profound spiritual and theological resonance, sits at the heart of Christianity, commemorating the passion, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. This celebration, marking the climax of the Christian liturgy, has its roots in the early days of Christianity, when the followers of Jesus remembered and venerated the final events of his earthly life. Initially, the observance of Holy Week was closely linked to the Jewish Passover, reflecting the biblical context of Jesus' Last Supper, which was held during the Jewish festival. Over the centuries, the celebration evolved from a simple commemoration to a series of complex rituals and liturgies. This development was influenced by various factors, including the formalization of the Christian calendar and the consolidation of Christian doctrine through ecumenical councils. These events helped establish a more uniform theological framework for the celebration of Holy Week, while preserving the essence of its origins. The significance of Holy Week transcends mere historical remembrance, delving into the depths of the human experience with themes of sacrifice, redemption, death, and rebirth. This week invites the faithful to personal and communal reflection on the suffering of Jesus and his victory over death, offering a message of hope and renewal. Through its rites and ceremonies, Christians around the world symbolically participate in the mysteries of Christ's passion, establishing a bridge between the divine and the human. Chapter 2: Celebrations in Antiquity. The Holy Week celebrations in Antiquity laid the foundations for the practices that millions of Christians continue to observe today. In the early centuries of Christianity, these celebrations varied significantly among different Christian communities, reflecting the diversity of traditions and theological approaches. However, a common element was the focus on the passion and resurrection of Jesus Christ, events that were commemorated with vigils, fasting, and prayers. One of the earliest challenges faced by the early church was determining the exact date for the celebration of Easter, reflecting the tension between following the Jewish chronology and establishing a distinct Christian identity. This controversy, known as the Paschal Controversy, culminated in the Council of Nicaea in 325, where it was established that Easter would be celebrated on the first Sunday after the first full moon following the spring equinox. This agreement unified the celebration within Christianity and marked a significant step in the development of an autonomous Christian identity. The practices of Holy Week in Antiquity were also deeply imbued with symbolism, with rituals that sought to facilitate a deep spiritual connection with the mysteries of faith. The Easter Vigil, for example, was one of the central practices that evolved during this period. This nocturnal celebration, preceding Easter Sunday, was and remains a liturgy rich in symbolism, from the light of candles dispelling darkness to the biblical readings that narrate the story of salvation. Furthermore, the ancient celebration of Holy Week emphasized spiritual preparation and penance, aspects that were reflected in the Lenten period preceding Holy Week. During this time, Christians dedicated themselves to fasting, prayer, and charity as means to purify the spirit and prepare for the spiritual renewal of Easter. This intensive preparation demonstrated the importance of Holy Week as a time of profound spiritual reflection and commitment to the paths of faith. Chapter 3: Medieval and Renaissance Traditions. During the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, Holy Week underwent a rich evolution in its practices and expressions, deeply intertwined with the social, cultural, and spiritual life of the era. In this period, the celebration of Holy Week was characterized by elaborate theatricality and a profound sense of community, reflecting the centrality of the Church in people's everyday lives. Processions and theatrical representations of the Passion of Christ became standout elements of medieval and Renaissance Holy Week. These processions, often sponsored by guilds and brotherhoods, wound through the streets of cities and towns, bringing scenes of the Passion into public life and allowing the community to collectively participate in the commemoration of the sacred events. The representations, on the other hand, dramatized the last days of Jesus, from his triumphant entry into Jerusalem to his resurrection, using art to communicate theological and spiritual messages to a largely illiterate population. Music also played a crucial role in the observance of Holy Week during these periods. Sacred polyphony, which reached sublime expressions in works by composers such as Tomás Luis de Victoria and Palestrina, enriched the liturgies with a deep emotional and spiritual dimension. These compositions, especially those written for Holy Week services, were notable for their ability to convey the pain, hope, and joy inherent in the Passion and Resurrection of Christ. Moreover, the Middle Ages and Renaissance saw an evolution in personal and communal devotional practices. Meditation on the Passion of Christ became a central spiritual practice, promoted through the reading of devotional texts, prayer, and contemplation of religious artworks. This personal devotion complemented the public observances, allowing the faithful to experience an intimate and personal connection with the mysteries of their faith. This era also witnessed a growing elaboration of liturgical rituals and the visual arts associated with Holy Week. Churches and cathedrals were adorned with splendor for the celebrations, with altars, sculptures, and paintings depicting scenes from the Passion, creating an environment that fostered reflection and veneration. This enrichment of the liturgical space reflected the importance of Holy Week as a time to experience divine presence through beauty and art. Chapter 4: The Reformation and Counter-Reformation. The Protestant Reformation and the Catholic Counter-Reformation marked a turning point in the history of Holy Week, bringing about significant changes in its observance that reflected the deep theological and liturgical divisions of the era. These movements not only reformed religious practice and ecclesiastical life across much of Europe but also had a lasting impact on how different branches of Christianity commemorate the central events of the faith. With the Reformation, leaders like Martin Luther and John Calvin questioned many practices of the Catholic Church, including some associated with Holy Week. The Reformers sought to purify the Christian faith and return to what they considered the biblical basis of worship, often involving simplifying liturgies and removing elements they saw as unfounded additions to Scripture. As a result, in Protestant churches, the observance of Holy Week became more sober, focused on the preaching of the Word and the interpretation of Scriptures related to the Passion of Christ. On the other hand, the Counter-Reformation, driven by the Council of Trent, reaffirmed the importance of traditions and liturgical practices in the observance of Holy Week, while seeking to purify and renew them to counter Protestant critiques. The Catholic Church emphasized the solemnity and mystery of Holy Week rituals, reinforcing the role of the sacraments and ceremonies as means to experience divine grace. This period also saw a renewed emphasis on the visual arts and music as vehicles for the expression of faith and devotion during Holy Week. The divergence in the observance of Holy Week between Catholics and Protestants reflected theological differences and underscored a distinct understanding of the role of tradition, ritual, and ecclesiastical authority in Christian life. While in Protestant communities, Holy Week became a time for reflective Bible study and personal introspection on Christ's sacrifice, in Catholic communities, it remained a time of intense liturgical and devotional activity, marked by participation in rituals considered means of grace. Chapter 5: Modernity and Globalization. Holy Week has undergone a profound transformation in the age of modernity and globalization, reflecting changes in society, culture, and religious practice throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, up to the present day. This era is characterized by increased secularization in many societies, as well as by an increase in global interconnectedness, factors that have significantly influenced how Holy Week is observed and understood in different parts of the world. Secularization, understood as the process by which religious beliefs and practices lose their primacy in society, has had a notable impact on the celebration of Holy Week. In many contexts, elements of Holy Week have transformed into more cultural than strictly religious events, attracting participants and spectators beyond faith communities. This has led to a diversification in the way Holy Week is experienced and understood, sometimes turning it into a meeting point between the sacred and the profane. At the same time, globalization has facilitated the diffusion and exchange of Holy Week traditions between different cultures and regions. This has resulted in a rich fusion of practices, where local expressions of Holy Week often incorporate elements from other traditions. In Latin America, for example, Holy Week celebrations reflect a synthesis of European Catholic traditions with indigenous and African practices and symbolism, creating unique observances that highlight the diversity of religious expression. This period has also seen changes in devotional and liturgical practice within the Church, seeking to make Holy Week more accessible and relevant to contemporary believers. In some communities, this has meant adapting liturgies to reflect modern concerns, such as social justice and peace, while in others, it has involved an effort to recover and preserve traditional forms of observance as a means of resistance against secularization. Chapter 6. Holy Week Today. The observance of Holy Week in the 21st century is a vibrant testament to how this ancient tradition remains significant in a world characterized by cultural plurality and rapid change. Today, Holy Week is celebrated with a diversity that reflects both the deep roots of the Christian tradition and the varied cultural expressions that have emerged in different parts of the world. This chapter explores how Holy Week is lived today, highlighting both the universal practices and local peculiarities that give this celebration its richness and color. In places like Seville, Spain, and Antigua, Guatemala, the Holy Week processions are events of great magnitude that attract thousands of faithful and tourists each year. These processions, with their impressive floats, platforms with religious figures, hooded penitents, and Nazarenes, are an expression of devotion that combines art, history, and spirituality. The majesty and solemnity of these celebrations reflect the deep importance that Holy Week holds in these communities, keeping centuries-old traditions alive. On the other hand, in many parts of the world, Holy Week is celebrated in a more intimate and personal manner. Local churches organize vigils, masses, and services that invite reflection and prayer, allowing individuals to connect with the deeper aspects of their faith. These observances, though less ostentatious than the grand processions, are equally significant, offering spaces for contemplation and spiritual renewal. Moreover, Holy Week today is also influenced by contemporary realities, such as digital technology and social media. The live streaming of religious services and Holy Week events allows those who cannot attend in person to participate virtually. This has opened new avenues for religious experience, allowing the observance of Holy Week to transcend physical barriers and connect a global community of believers. However, the celebration of Holy Week is not without challenges. In an increasingly plural world, where secularization advances in many societies, the relevance and meaning of Holy Week are questioned by some. Despite this, the ability of this tradition to adapt and resonate with current generations suggests that its essence remains powerful. Holy Week offers an opportunity to reflect on universal themes of sacrifice, redemption, and hope, providing a space for introspection and the expression of faith that remains deeply meaningful for many around the world.